I want to just briefly spend some time with you this evening thinking about the internet and digital technology. And I want to ask you a somewhat counterintuitive or maybe even provocative question. What would you call the biggest religion in the world? What is the biggest religion in the world? Well, statistically, if you wanted to look at demographics, you might say something like Christianity or Islam. Or if you wanted to kind of take it a step further into worldview, you might say the religion of the self is the biggest religion in the world. But I would like to propose to you tonight that it would actually not be an inaccurate answer to respond with the internet. That the internet actually could and can rightfully be considered the biggest religion in the world. And why I can say that will become a little bit clear as we go, but part of why I wrote the book Digital Liturgies and why I'm spending time with you this evening is I want us all to kind of try to think of the internet less like a neutral tool, like a screwdriver or a wrench, something that simply responds to whatever the user wants, and more like the building that we're in, a church. More like an environment that actually has particular effects and a place that makes us feel certain things and not feel other things. I think it's accurate to call the internet and social media that kind of environment. It's not an exaggeration to say that the internet and social media, and particularly the smartphone, are now the dominant way that people interact with the outside world. Now, one of the challenges with talking about this technology is that the revolution has still been so recent that, as John mentioned, a lot of us in this room can very easily imagine our lives without the internet because we kind of straddle that generational line. Well, very soon that's not going to be true. It's going to be the case for almost everyone in just a few years that we have no living memory of a world before the internet, that this technology has, in effect, replaced nearly every analog means of living life. And for the emerging generation, it is true that this has become the most dominant way that we interact with the world. So, for example, about 5 billion people use social media for about an average of 2 hours and 20 minutes every day. About 5 billion YouTube videos are watched each day. The average TikTok user is on the app for an hour a day, watching between 100 and 200 videos. That is an enormous stream of material that is coming into our attention span. And I want us to envision something that is incredibly plausible and, in fact, very common in our day. Imagine someone waking up out of bed. Before they're even able to get out of bed, they reach over to their bedside table and grab their phone and caught up to speed with email and social media and news. They wake up and get dressed and they go and log on to their computer for work. They haven't left their living room, but their work consists of being in front of a computer screen. After work, for a few hours, they put away the work and go all the way to their sofa, where they order food on their phone. And as the food is being delivered to their house, they fire up Netflix or Max or Prime, and they conclude their day with streaming. That is how an increasingly large number of people in our world today spend their entire day. Their friendships, their recreation, their work, their learning, and even their worship are mediated online. So it becomes very important for us as Christians to understand what is this technology and how is it shaping us. And the phrase I want to use for you tonight and that I want you to take home is the phrase plausibility structure. A plausibility structure simply refers to a set of conditions that makes certain things feel more likely true or desirable, and other things feel less likely true or desirable. So, for example, When you go into the mall or into an upscale shopping store, you don't see ugly photographs of very homely looking models wearing the product. You see the opposite. You see very beautiful pictures of very attractive people wearing the product. When you go into the Apple store, it's not very dimly lit and kind of grungy and dark with people looking very dour. It's a very upbeat, upscale environment with very glassy and very glossy finishes on everything. What I've just described to you are plausibility structures. Those are nonverbal ways of making you feel, I want to buy this. I believe that this will make me happier, healthier, more attractive if I do this. A church, like the one we're in right now, is a plausibility structure. When you enter into this church, there, especially during corporate worship, there is something about the church's liturgy that makes the gospel feel real to you. And I want to try to convince you tonight that in particularly 5 ways, the internet is a kind of liturgy. It's a kind of plausibility structure that is pushing certain kinds of values and attitudes and beliefs onto our hearts, even and especially when we don't notice it. So what I want to do for you tonight is I want to go through 5 ways that this happens. I want to describe to you 5 things that the digital generation, the emerging generation of what's called digital natives, people whose lives are kind of similar to what I just described, whose friendships and education and vocation and entertainment are all increasingly mediated by digital technology. I want to describe for you what this technology is giving those people and what it's not giving them. So the first thing is that digital technology gives identity without objectivity. Identity without objectivity. A social media user, you or I, you and me, whatever social media we use, a social media user can determine who they are entirely by what they choose to share or post. You can craft your identity online. If you want people to think you are this way, you post this way. If you want people to think you look a certain way, you post these pictures, and you don't post other pictures, or you don't post other things that might reflect poorly on you. You can entirely control your identity and your sense of self through your use of digital technology. You can choose to identify in whatever way you want, because when you go online, when I go online, we are stepping into an environment that is completely separated from our physical bodies. We become disembodied when we go online. The same technology that makes us watch and consume and communicate in places that we're not physically at the moment is the technology that makes us feel not as whole persons, but as simply minds, as disembodied minds. I believe firmly that this is very close to the root of the gender revolution that is happening in our culture. It is one thing for a person to identify themselves by their impulses. But what has happened, I believe, is that a generation that has grown up online has simply not ever been trained to see themselves as whole people. Their friendships, their education, their political activism, and even their experience of romance and sexuality has been mediated by disembodied technology. The meaning being, if you want to say you are this thing, you are this thing. It's not a hard stretch to see how the gender revolution might come from that, is it? And we see this identity without objectivity in the way that the internet tends to flatten out all distinctions. The customer review. The customer review is the absolute gold standard of right versus wrong on the internet. The customer review determines what's true and what's false. This is identity without objectivity. So the second thing that the internet gives us is zeal without discernment. Zeal without discernment. We are in an election year, and I would imagine that almost everyone in this room has probably some story they could share of something that they saw on social media that really upset them, really made them angry. Perhaps you even have a story of a strained relationship because of an exchange that you had online. Someone posted something and you commented and they commented back, and before you knew it, it was an absolute mess and relationships were strained. Anger, activism, and accusation go hand in hand with digital technology. Why? Because the internet is an environment where our impulses matter more than deep thought. Because these are computerized systems, what matters most is being able to go through everything as quickly as possible, the way a computer is. We are learning how to think like a computer when we talk about politics or gender or theology online. We are typically talking about them in a way that a computer would. Very quickly, very efficiently, and often for the approval of others who are watching. Nicholas Carr, in his book from 2010 called The Shallows, What the Internet is Doing to Our Brains, is an essential book. Nicholas Carr points out that one of the revolutions of the printing press and the physical book was that when a person reads a physical book, they have a unique connection with the ideas where they're able to think for themselves and independently decide what they think. Pardon me. The difference with reading online is that our social relationships are integrated into our thinking in a way that makes us want to believe certain things simply for others' approval. C.S. Lewis had a famous essay called The Abolition of Man, and a part of this essay has a famous quote called, referring to men without chests. C.S. Lewis, you may be familiar with it. C.S. Lewis says, "We make men without chests," meaning emotional fortitude and strength and courage. "We make men without chests and expect of them virtue and enterprise." I would like to suggest that we could easily switch that around for the internet age and say that one of the problems we have today are chests without men. We have a lot of feeling, a lot of zeal, a lot of how dare you, a lot of I'm never going to talk to you again, a lot of I can't believe you said that, but we don't have much discernment. We don't have much deep thought. The third thing that the digital age gives us is moralism without atonement. Moralism without atonement. Do you know the phrase shame culture? Do you know the phrase virtue signaling? These are when things happen, particularly in online spaces, where someone will say something or do something and it offends the wrong kind of people, and immediately that person's life is derailed by the amount of anger and outrage, and calls for them to be fired, and calls for their friends to abandon them because they have offended something. And the vast majority of the time, it's not a serious source of offense. It's a bad joke or a tasteless meme or something like that. The internet is full of moralism. It's never been easier to find examples of college students who are shouting down a visiting lecturer because they don't believe that his or her beliefs are worth hearing. And the internet shapes us to expect this kind of behavior. Why? Because the internet is an ecosystem where we are trained that whatever we don't want to experience can simply be deleted. It can simply be muted. It can simply be blocked and erased. You see, as we learn to encounter the world through our digital technology, which is what my generation did, and especially Gen Z after us, when we learn how to engage the world through this technology, we begin to believe that the physical world should operate the way our digital worlds do. And so if I can make you stop talking by pressing a button, if I can make you go away by pressing the X, I should be able to make you go away in real life. Moralism without atonement. I want you to listen to what Jean Twenge, a sociologist who has done a lot of work on Gen Z and the internet, one of the things she observed in her book, iGen, which is a very, very helpful and important book, was that from 1998 to 2016, the percentage of college students who identified as going to church declined over 20%. So moral relativism, in other words, the belief that your beliefs don't really matter, you do whatever you want to do, that was on the rise. Fewer college students were willing to say such and such religion is the right way, such and such way to live your life is wrong. So that declined. But also from 1998 to 2016, Jean Twenge found that more and more students were more likely to deem a particular statement racist or sexist, or to say that a particular speaker should not be allowed to speak at a school. In other words, moral relativism rose at the same time that tolerance for other opinions declined. Now, either that is just some kind of mysterious thing. How does moral relativism go up while tolerance declines? That doesn't make any sense. But I don't think it is a mystery. I think what we're seeing is the influence of a digitally inflected experience of the world. We are less tolerant of one another, partially because the world as we experience it through our technology is not a world that requires us to be tolerant of one another. Moralism without atonement. Number 4. The digital age has given us pleasure without joy. Pleasure without joy. And I don't think it's shocking or surprising to hear that pornography has been the internet's chief export. I think that's true. And I think that evangelicals have been right over the last 20 years plus to talk so much about it, the scourge of digital pornography and what it does to our men and to our communities and to our marriages and to our women. That's true. However, I think as we've talked about this, we have missed something that is perhaps equally important: the way that the entire internet is pornographically shaped. And here's what I mean by that. I don't mean that everything on the internet is pornography, but I mean that the same mentality and the same worldview behind internet pornography is active in so much of what we use the internet for. In other words, the web is pornographically shaped. What do I mean by that? I mean that the web is a place that we go to consume that which can only be properly experienced. The web is where we go to consume that which can only be properly experienced. On the web, we consume friendship by watching YouTube videos of people pretending to be our friends. You can look this up. This is a massive genre of YouTube video with millions of plays every day. People pretending to be a friend and talking to the camera to convince the user for a moment that they have a friend. We consume beauty online. One of the telltale signs of our age that we live in is the phrase earth porn. Do you know what earth porn is? Earth porn is simply beautiful pictures of landscapes. There's nothing explicit or obscene about it. You know why we call it earth porn? Because it sits there on the screen and we engage with it the exact same way we engage with pornography. It's a beautiful canyon in Arizona, or it's a gorgeous waterfall in upstate New York, or it's a beautiful grassland in my native state of Kentucky. And it just sits there on the screen. And all we can do is gaze at it, press a button, and swipe on to the next thing. Sex is meant to be an experience between two subjects, a husband and a wife, but pornography makes it into a package that can be consumed instead of experienced. That is what the internet does to so much of our life. And we see the effects of this, don't we? Over the last 50 years, the marriage rate in the US has dropped by nearly 60%. That is an astonishing statistic. 40% of Gen Z men aged 17 and over have never been on a date. This is a crisis of loneliness, and it's a crisis of intimacy and of marriage and of childbearing. But what's at the core of it? Well, I think one thing that's at the core of it is that we are all living in digital worlds that inspire us and encourage us to consume instead of experience. That we sit behind the safety of our screens and we take what the Lord has meant for us to experience and we turn it into something to download. Number 5. The internet, the social internet in particular, has given us busyness without purpose. Busyness without purpose. How many times have I been distracted by something I didn't even care about on my phone? How many times has a call of, "Daddy, look at me, Daddy, look at me, Daddy, look at me," pulled me out of something that I didn't even care about, but for some reason was so fixated on? Increasingly, I am confronted on my social media and my web intake with controversies that I can't possibly affect between people I don't know on issues that I honestly know nothing about. Increasingly, I get on my phone and I see scary story and outrageous thing and a reminder that I'm not a good dad because I didn't do this particular hack today, or I'm not a good worker because I haven't purchased this productivity tool yet. And it's just on and on and on and on. And influencers reminding me that my life is terrible compared to theirs. Parenting gurus who have to take 20 pictures of their kids to get the right one, who make me feel like I'm not a good dad because my kids aren't as smiling and happy as they are in those pictures. Perhaps this explains why the mental health crisis among teenage girls in particular has become so severe that even Facebook and Instagram are scrambling to do damage control, admitting in documents, in internal documents, that they knew that their algorithm was designed to elicit feelings of insecurity and insufficiency from young women. What about young men? Young men who are aimless in life, who have a dead-end job, who don't have very few friends, who spend their lives getting radicalized online by men who tell them that they are victims and that they should be angry at women for ignoring them. Post after post after post after post. Busyness without purpose, meaninglessness. It's no surprise that Gen Z reports poorer mental health than any generation prior. We have more money, we have more comforts, we have more ability to control the things we do, more ability to watch or listen to or even go anywhere we want to. And yet we're not happy. We're unhappy. Why? Because for all of our stuff, we are being weighed down by a lack of purpose. Just one more scroll, just one more click. So, this is a little bit of a downer. I get it. I do have good news, though. I have good news, though. The good news is that the Bible anticipates all of this. The wisdom in Scripture anticipates all of this. And you say, what does that mean? It means that embedded in the gospel, in Christian Scripture, are every tool we need to live wisely and to flourish in a digital age. And it doesn't matter that the Bible was written thousands of years before this technology, because the technology itself simply contains the same human fallenness that has always plagued us. So, what do we need to do, though? What does that look like in our generation? Well, let me give you kind of an overarching statement, and then I'll kind of describe this in 3 levels. One, the big picture thing is that we as Christians can construct new plausibility structures in our life. New plausibility structures. So what this means is that as we look over our lives, we can reach out to the next generation and we can fortify our own families and our own communities by creating new habits and new practices that reinforce gospel truth. So what does this look like? Well, I think there's 3 things that our new plausibility structures can recover. We can recover Christian thinking, we can recover Christian community, and we can recover Christian mission. So let me talk about those very quickly as we land the plane. Christian thinking. How do we recover Christian thinking? Well, recovering Christian thinking means going back to the source. It means going back to words that are permanent and not changing. Imagine for one moment that you woke up tomorrow in a different bed, with it next to a different person, in a different town, working a different job, and everything was different. Imagine that the next day you woke up in a different bed, next to a different person, in a different town with a different job, and the next day and the day after that. Does that sound like a flourishing life to you? No. And yet, that kind of novelty, that kind of relentless novelty is what we saturate our minds with online. So what does that need? It needs the weight and the ballast of permanent words. And here I'm just going to preach. I'm going to tell you the Sunday school answer. The answer is the Word of God. The answer is structuring our lives morning and evening with the Word of God. It's about putting structures in our life. And this is as simple as a daily devotion and as brief as just a family prayer. It's about structuring our lives in such a way so that no matter what has come over us or past us, we remind ourselves each day that there are permanent words. The words of Scripture can anchor us because nothing else can. Everything else is shifting sand outside of Christian wisdom. So that looks like building this structure into our lives. And that's my question for all of us is, do our lives reflect that? If we were to take an audit of how we spent today, would we be able to tell which words were permanent and which words were not based on how we spent our hours this day? Can our children, through the way our family spends their time, tell which words matter most and which ones don't? Do our lives reflect the aimless shift from anxiety to insecurity to anger, of being pushed and pulled by the internet? Or is there a stability anchored by our knowledge and our trust in the Word? So that's Christian thinking. Christian community. Christian community. We can recover Christian community. One of the things that I think the internet has done very powerfully in a harmful way is it has made us accustomed to the idea of privacy. It has accustomed us to the idea of privacy. Digital technology has normalized a laptop in every bedroom, a social media account with a password no one knows but you, secrecy, privacy. And you know what that is? That's isolation. That's what that is. We prize these things because we believe that we own them or we have possession over our digital lives. We don't necessarily want people reading those messages or seeing everything that we've posted or liked. But I think Christian community, rebuilding Christian community, begins with interrogating the need for privacy. I don't think that privacy is an ultimate goal in Christian wisdom. In fact, I know it's not. You know what is? Love. Confessing sin to one another, forgiving one another, exhorting one another. These are all the elements of Christian community. Is your life, is my life, or our lives shaped around our own sense of privacy around our digital habits? Does anyone else know your password? Would anyone else feel the freedom to come up to you and say, hey, that thing you posted or that thing you liked, I actually don't think that was a good idea. I think you should think twice about that. Does anyone have that authority in your life? We can model to the next generation that the gospel means connection, authentic connection with other people, cultivating friends, not just followers. Pixels are not made in God's image, only people are. Don't just send that text, make that phone call. Don't just like that post, go out to lunch. Don't just be a follower, be in each other's lives, in each other's homes, and come to church. The church is one of the last institutions in America where people actually routinely gather. You realize that is very strange to the outside world. We're not even talking about what we're believing. It's simply the fact that somebody 75 years old and somebody 13 years old and a single mom and a professional dad would all come together and sit in the same building for an hour. That is strange to the outside world. And whatever is strange to the outside world is an opportunity to witness to God's truth. Come to church. Don't forsake the assembling of the church, Christian community. And finally, Christian mission. Rebuilding Christian mission. I believe part of the mandate that we have right now is to infuse our lives and the lives of those around us with a new sense of purpose, a new sense of what does it mean to spend my life? Is my life all about making just enough money so that I can digitally numb myself to my anxiety, my insecurity, my lust, my lack of purpose? Or is there something else that I'm called to? Is there a higher calling in my life? Does my life have to shrink down to the size of a glass iPhone? Rebuilding Christian mission means reminding each other that we have a job in this world. The mandate that God gave Adam and Eve in Genesis is still ongoing. Fill the earth, subdue it, be his image bearers, be his co-regents on the earth. Fill the earth with the knowledge of the glory of God. That means coming out of our digital enclaves long enough to participate in kingdom mission. And that might look like, for all of us, it might look like serving at a particular place with a particular people. It might look like the ministry of presence, going to that person's house who can't come out themselves. But we're lacking a sense of Christian mission when the Bible clearly tells us what that mission is. We can spur one another on to mission. Your life has a purpose. Your life is not meaningless. It's not simply one more page for someone to decide if they like or don't like. You are not one more thing for someone to swipe past. You have infinite value. The God of the universe has created you in his image, and you have a mission in life. And it is not to simply watch as much as you can. Because only when pouring yourself out, only when losing your life will you find it. Let's rebuild Christian thinking, Christian community, and Christian mission. I'm going to close this time together just by rereading a passage that I think matters so much for discovering Christian wisdom in a digital age. Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of scoffers. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. He is like a tree planted by streams of water that yields its fruit in its season, and its leaf does not wither. In all that he does, he prospers. The wicked are not so, but are like chaff that the wind drives away. Therefore the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous. For the Lord knows the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked will perish. I want to draw your attention to just one metaphor in there. It says the righteous man who meditates on the law of the Lord is like a tree, and it says the unrighteous man is like chaff. What grows faster? Chaff. What's more efficient? Chaff. What covers more ground? Faster. Chaff. What's slower? A tree. What takes more time? A tree. What is not efficient? A tree. In this metaphor, the Lord is calling us to be more like inefficient trees and less like super efficient chaff, because it's our need for speed and efficiency that actually fool us and put us in the arms of foolishness. So I want to encourage us all to witness to the world around us like trees and less like chaff, that it is worth doing the hard, slow work of rebuilding Christian thinking, Christian community, and Christian mission into our lives. All right. Thank you so much.
Well, I hope you have found this discussion not only inspiring, but also informative. Christians have to be able to think, especially in this constantly changing culture, from a Christian worldview. To learn more and to find more discussions, please visit lighthousevoices.org. That's lighthousevoices.org.